of analysis on Rwanda Decides, the vote that has taken place today, of course, from the 3rd of August, with the diaspora voting for the president, and of course today Rwandans living here taking part in that particular exercise. And tonight, today at this particular moment, we're going to be analyzing the happenings in this election. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. It's an interactive conversation. Feel free to join us. Tweet me directly at Eugene Anangwe. Use the hashtag RwandaElection2017 or Rwanda Decides, and we'll be able to follow that hashtag in the course of the program. You can as well add another one, which we have also looked into: My Vote, My Choice. Let us know what you think of the whole process of the election. All right, so let me introduce my panelists right here on the program by starting off with the far left. Gonzag Muganwa, journalist and of course also a political commentator. Thank you so much for being on the program again.
Thank you very much for.
And of course we also have Goloba Mutewi, and he's also a researcher and definitely an analyst on political issues. Thank you so much, Fred, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And of course on my immediate left is Alice Karekezi, and of course she's a lecturer at the University of Rwanda and a commentator as well on political matters. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, probably what we would start off with is the proof. They always say the proof of life. Show us proof of life, and we'll be able to know whether we give you the deal or not. So in this case, I want just to first of all start there. There we go. Alice has voted. Oh, there it is.
I voted yesterday.
You voted yesterday and washed it out. Eh? What about you, Gonzag? Did you vote?
Mine has disappeared.
It has disappeared. Why I ask you this is because I want to know your personal experience as far as this whole exercise is concerned, from where you voted from, or if you also did not vote, you could also just share with us why you were not able to vote. Let's start with you, Alice.
I voted this morning at around 8:45 in Kimihurura, and my experience of it started actually yesterday when in the community people were organizing to try to have our voting polls. We were voting at École Internationale as beautiful as we could. So it was very interesting to see how not only the population, citizens want to go and cast their votes, but also have it as a celebration of the citizenship. Where we voted to this morning, there was a crowd of people. And I was very impressed to see many youngsters coming, and almost as if somebody would dispute them to not to vote. So they were in a hurry. They were in big numbers. And also I noted senior citizens. What struck me the most was how people looked good, how people were serene, and two particular senior citizens, one lady, pretty aged, who could barely climb the stairs, and who was so curved and with a kabando, you know, and two members of the family doing that. She was obviously paining to make it to the poll, but she made a point to come there.
And she did it.
Yes, another citizen also, an aged man, who was in wheelchair. And this is a place where I wasn't so disabled friendly, but seeing that was really something
that touched your heart. Let me talk to our friend Fred, because you voted in the diaspora. And I want to hear your experience, because you know, when we did our first show on the analysis, we talked to various Rwandans in the diaspora, and they also gave us their perspective. But let's hear from you. What was so appealing, or you know, nice, that was so interesting for you in your voting experience?
I don't know if nice is the word I would use. There are several things that struck me, others that sort of shocked me a bit. I had already made inquiries 2 days before the election as to what time one should turn up in order to ensure that one doesn't get caught up in long queues and so on and so forth. And I was told that voting was starting at 7. I voted in Kampala, at the Rwandan embassy in Kampala. So the voting started at 7. I had wanted to go at 7, but then I had a piece of work that I wanted to finish before I went, because I knew once I left home and went to the embassy, I might not come back in the mood to work. So I stayed home until midday. So we went to vote at 12:30, and the place was chocked with vehicles in these matatu buses. The entire neighborhood was full of matatu buses, which obviously meant that a lot of people went places. These were not just people coming from Kampala. And I did make a point of asking somebody at the embassy where they thought these people were coming from, and he said, oh, they've come from as far as northern Uganda, eastern Uganda. So Rwandans living in almost every corner and cranny of Uganda turned up to vote. Now, when we arrived at the High Commission itself, the queue was very long. The road from where you start entering the High Commission is probably about 500 meters. And it was choking with people. This is midday. The voting had started 5 hours before. So it was very difficult to get through this crowd. And it was hot. The sun was really out. People had babies. I mean, children who were really screaming and so on. But it was quite obvious that people were determined to vote. And from what I understood, this went on until very late in the evening. Now, first of all, people coming from up country, it is hot. Nobody has paid their passage. There is no food, no water, nothing. Now, all these things struck me, given what we have been reading in media, both African media and Western media, and what we've been hearing commentators of all types saying. Now, the narrative is that inside Rwanda, people are being forced to go and attend rallies.
Right.
Probably,
and I think
probably they are being forced to go and vote as well.
Right.
What I saw in Uganda was really, it suggested to me that there is a reason why Rwandans turn up to vote in such large numbers. And we do need to pay some attention to that.
Right. We will dig a bit deeper into that. First of all, let's just set the mood or the tone for this conversation. Let me hear you, Gonzag, your experience. Did you vote? If you did, what was the experience there? If you did not as well, why did you not vote?
My experience didn't begin with the vote. I tried to travel across the country to witness the candidates campaigning. The two of them, I did not for the independent candidate, but the others, I went to several rallies. And up to the end of campaigns, I was there in Bumbogo. The mood that is there. Last night, everywhere I went, people were already celebrating. It's a party. Everywhere I go, somebody say, have a beer on me, it's a party. In the morning, of course, it began with the usual somebody with a bullhorn who walks around the village, telling people, waking up people to go and vote. You find that I went to the polling station, the music, it was very beautifully decorated. As she said, young people were there, who were the most excited. People voting for the first time. You could feel it is in them that they want to exercise their rights. The fact that they can choose a president. So it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day.
Right.
I went.
It was a beautiful day. Now, of course, Fred has actually preempted one of the things that we'll be looking at into this particular conversation on election processes and democracy as defined by others and, of course, defined by us as Africans, as far as, you know, what other people say about this particular process. And I want to hear from you, Alice, because at the end of the day, you know, I had a conversation here yesterday where, you know, one of the panelists was actually saying that, you know, we have leaders, some of African leaders who are not actually doing what they had promised the electorate. And when electorates complain, and then I asked, these leaders got there because they were elected. And he was like, but where did we get that idea that democracy is about elections? And then I was like, okay, fine. If we feel then that it's not our homegrown solution to solving our issue, then why do we actually exercise it? So I want to hear from you, your perspective on elections as far as democracy is concerned. We have seen even in the United States where, yes, Donald Trump was voted in a process that is said to have been a democratic process. But today when you read and see the evaluation of the whole process, then you wonder if election indeed is the solution to democracy. What is your take on that?
Well, I will not go that much on what the narrative that is there, because it has been discussed at length. But my take on that is really observing what has been happening. I would say shortly, elections is what you make it. As democracy is what societies and countries and people make it. Attending a few rallies, the campaigns, what I had to think about what I was seeing, because spending too much time on what they say about that prevent us to try to observe, analyze, and take stock of what we are seeing. Whenever, for example, the candidate of Rwanda Patriotic Front was speaking, Paul Kagame, it was very brief, and it was like an accountability time. He made pledges, he had a manifesto, he did things, he came to see people he has seen before, and they are speaking about how far they have gone and how much remains to be done. So I say, okay, we can speculate about what different people think about democracy and even electoral system as democratization. But what is very important that we are witnessing here in Rwanda, that we have, as Golopa was mentioning, we have really to pay attention on what we are seeing. Rwanda has something to say. He has promised, he come to account.
To what he has done.
To
and
what he
plans
has done.
to do.
And we are speaking about social welfare. We are speaking about stateness in its essence. So for me, even going to homegrown democracy, no, the essence of politics, the social contract, a pact between governors and governed, and accountability time. When campaign is a moment of accountability of the governor to its governed, and the occasion for sealing another pact for the future, that is another thing.
Right.
That's what Rwanda is teaching.
Right. Goloba, you actually mentioned this, that we have seen or been reading, a narrative that has been created by, those who feel that the space here, as far as democracy is concerned, is not that enough. I mean, it's not that big enough to allow for, varied views and all that. And Alice here says, sort of, we should not lose, we should keep our eyes on the ball. That we should not actually spend much of our energies looking at what or reacting to what others think about our democratic model. Do you think, as Rwandans, we have swallowed that bait? Because I've seen over the past few days a lot of rebuttals on social media on this and that. Are we losing focus? Are we wasting our time responding to these people? Or what should we be doing as Rwandans?
There is an element of wasting time, of course. But at the same time, it's very difficult to ignore some of these things. If you live in Rwanda, if you observe what happens in this country, and let's not pretend, Rwanda is not paradise. Rwanda is not perfect. But which country is? There are problems in this country. There are people in this country who are unhappy. There are people who are disgruntled. But there are also very many people who are happy and who are very hopeful for the future. Now, what happens is that these commentators who really harp on one thing, there is no space, there's human rights abuse, and people are being killed, and people are running away, and so on and so forth. They are focusing very narrowly on things, some of which are actually very old stories. They are recycling them and presenting them as if they are new stories. Now, if you live here and you've spent your time trying to understand what is going on, it's irritating. It's annoying, and you need to be extremely patient not to respond. Or you need to be extremely patient, or even superhuman, not to respond angrily sometimes. So there is an element of provocation. There is an element of people who are terribly ignorant, who think that whatever happens in their countries is the model that everybody should follow. So they come here carrying baggage in their heads, they want to lecture everybody to do things the way they do them. And, I mean, I call them ignorant because they don't spend any time trying to contextualize anything. They think if in their countries they have 35 parties and candidates abuse each other and people fight in the streets, and that's how they define democracy, that this is how democracy should be defined in Rwanda. So, yes, there is an element of time wasting. But there is also something to be said for responding robustly to these people. Response does have an effect. Not as much, it doesn't sell as much as these negative stories. But if you let them get away with it all the time, and I have seen the foreign minister responding in very robust terms to people like Kenneth Roth, and I think it's a good thing. We shouldn't let them get away with this. Rwanda is not their country. They don't live here. If this country blows up it becomes unstable, they are going to be sitting in New York in their air-conditioned offices. They are not the ones who are going to pay the price. They will never experience what's happening here. Right. What right do they have to lecture anyone about democracy? They don't have it. Now, moving on from that, the thing is, you asked whether democracy is about elections. Democracy is about elections and many other things. Before we got into politics that is competitive, that involves government side and opposition and so on, we had democracies that functioned in very specific ways. Yes. Rwanda was a monarchy. There was an established tradition of choosing who becomes a king. And there were established traditions regarding how that king was expected to behave and how that king was expected to relate to the population. Now, all those things defined what democracy was at that time. But unfortunately, we Africans bought into modern democracy, where you have government and opposition. And inevitably, we have to embrace elections. But are elections the only thing that defines democracy? No, they aren't. Democracy is defined by many other things. Right. And for me, what I think Rwanda is doing, Rwanda is trying to define democracy within its own context. And these people who sort of harass the government and harass the country, these people who are always heckling, I mean, they have their own interests to promote. But the thing is, should Rwanda be deflected from carrying out the very necessary experiment that is carrying out? I think it shouldn't. Because tomorrow, if Rwanda is stable for the long term, it's to the benefit of Rwandans. Mistakes are going to be made along the way, and mistakes have been made. The good thing here is the government here seems to learn from its mistakes. The quality of these campaigns has been very different from 2010. Speak to Frank Habineza, who experienced 2010, ask him what the difference is between then and now, and he can tell you what the difference is. Right. The Electoral Commission this time has done much better than last time round. It has attempted to do new things, so like printing ballots that allow blind people to vote without being guided. All that is improvement. So the hecklers should be ignored, but at times they should also be responded to robustly.
Right. We'll come to you, Gonzaga, on the same particular question, but of course, let me now bring in our reporter who is live at the Rwanda National Electoral Commission's headquarters, where we are expecting tonight the exit polls to be announced. This is as it had been announced by officials from the Rwanda National Electoral Commission. And of course, let me now talk to Isabel. Are you able to talk to us a bit about what is actually going on right now at the Electoral Commission, Isabel?
Eugene, what we have here is a very calm environment. And what you can see is a lot of people ready and having a sense of a reaffirmation of the democracy that is being exercised today. And earlier when I spoke to some officials, they were saying that the turnout has been great. At least 97% of the registered voters have come out and voted already. So it is a very good environment, calm, and a lot is expected to happen on this very stage tonight. Behind me is where we will have the results unveiled by midnight today. We will have the provisional results ready. And Rwandans will have an idea, a picture of what the decision is for the next president of this country.
All right. Isabel, before I let you go, have you been able to speak to the officials of the Rwanda National Electoral Commission? Because at least you say that, there seems to be enthusiasm that there was great voter turnout as far as, the registered voters are concerned. But have they spoken to you at least on some of the impediments or the challenges that they've probably gone through in this process?
Eugene, what you get when you ask about that is that there has not been a great challenge. It seems like they trust in the system and in the process, and that it has been a smooth journey to this very point.
All right, Isabel, I'm sure you'll be giving us or keeping us up to speed on what will be happening right there. Do we already have numbers of people who have already started trickling there, or the hall is still empty? What's the situation looking like? If you could paint a picture for us at the headquarters of the NEC.
What we have now are the journalists already coming through, and most of them are actually happy to be here and witness. And maybe something I didn't say earlier, Eugene, is that this very place was inaugurated by the incumbent, the president of this nation 10 years ago today. So it is a sense of comfort, of jubilation, and the people, as they come in, you feel that they're just expectant of the results.
All right. Thank you so much, Isabel. Stay with us. I'm sure you'll be giving us more details on this as it unfolds, and we'll be joining you in the course of this particular program. Thank you so much. All right. That is our reporter, Isabel Masozer, of course, giving us what the mood is like at the Rwanda National Electoral Commission's headquarters, where you will be able to find or get the exit polls tonight. And of course, the officials from the National Electoral Commission had hinted that at least by tomorrow we'll be able to have the provisional results, and then at least earlier next week, around Tuesday, this is what the Executive Secretary of the National Electoral Commission did say. They could be announcing the final result and then handing over to other bodies or organs that are supposed to prepare for the inauguration process and other steps as far as election of a new president or a president of the Republic of Rwanda is concerned. Let's get back to our conversation right here in studio. Of course, we are definitely also reading your tweets and thoughts. In case you have them, just quickly send them in. We'll be able to read them right here in the course of the program. I have Epa David, who says, in Africa, I do believe democracy depends on how a country was laid. We can't copy the West because they have their own background. This is what he says. Just tweet me directly at Eugene and Nangwe. I'll be able to sample your comments in the course of this particular program. And of course, we have Gonzag Mugano and of course Fred Golobo Mutevi and Alice Karekezi with me right here on the program, trying to digest this issue of election and democracy and giving you updates on how Rwandan elections have gone. So far, Gonzag, talk to me about your thoughts on this particular issue of responding to detractors. Are we swallowing the bait? Because at the end of the day, someone tells you, you don't have to respond to this one because you know your principles.
I think this is a mutually beneficial conflict because, first of all, the Rwandan story is big. There are few African countries that would attract this much media attention from the West or from major media outlets across the globe. So the fact that Rwanda is being covered to this level explains the story. It's part of what is going on in Rwanda, that almost every media house has sent the journalists, or even those who don't have them here, they are reporting from their desks. Now, secondly, I understand how, I'm a journalist, I meet most of these guys who come to report here, and I know for a fact the stories go that way because that's what will be published. If they published what we usually say is not balanced, they would, the editors largely would not run the story. And for a journalist, an opportunity to fly from Europe to Africa to cover a story is big, even financially. So that's one, the way how media works most of the times. Even reporters based here, usually you send in your story, the editor will add a few paragraphs to create balance.
Or remove some.
Or remove some, yes.
Right.
So responding to them, I think, as I said, yes, it's not a bad thing at the end of the day. It's not a bad thing at the end of the day. There's something I wanted to point out about, because everywhere I went, I made sure I asked, are you being forced to come here? And people everywhere. I met a very interesting man in Bumbogo. He told me he's 80 years old. He said, me coming here, he walked about 5 kilometers. He said, I can only compare to when the Pope came in 1990, seeing the president, seeing this particular president, Kagame. I can only compare to seeing Pope John Paul. And this is somebody who's 80 years old. And I asked why. He said, oh, can you imagine a country where you're not being told to kill? Can you imagine a country where killers were forgiven? He said, my sons were forgiven. They are home. I can't believe this is. So the guy said, this is not normal. You wouldn't expect it. So when you hear those stories, there's a particular kind of experience that somebody who has not been here, who has not lived among the people, will not understand.
Will not understand. Right.
Understand.
And this brings me to the question of what many people always say, let us tell our own stories. And some have argued, Alice, that this is sort of a slogan because we don't seem to actually be doing it ourselves. And probably that is why some people take advantage of that and fill in that missing gap or that missing link with their stories that we come out to refute when we have not gone all out to actually tell the real story. I mean, talk to me about your experience.
Well, sometimes people are busy making history rather than writing the history, the histories of others. I think, I think Mugano has hit it on that, saying how journalism also work, the reality of having a script to sell. So I will not go back to that. And also there are many people who have the comfort of their models as reference. So it is there. In this country, people have also pained all those days, all those years, all those fruits that we are reaping today. People who are busy working. So most of the time, when you live your life, the first thing is not to tell your neighbor what you are living as an experience. But in Rwanda, the lack of fairness vis-a-vis the injustice of judgments that we receive creates that sense that our history is being hijacked. You see, here is a people more than, just a bit more than 20 years, was struggling to remain a people, a country, and to build from the ashes. So when you hear people saying, and it will come again, saying we want to tell our own story, because they realize that while they were busy trying to reconstitute life, other people were hijacking the histories. So it should be expected that people will react that way. That said, I'm not of the opinion that you have just to leave them. I'm trying to check some balance here, because I was following the discussions, the debate, and sometimes I had a sense that it took us a lot of energy just to be reactive to what is happening. And perhaps in the same time, we are reproducing the same frames that we would like to reject. Because it takes also observation, because our generation, while we're living this momentum, we need also to capitalize on that, to secure the gains. And this requires to understand what we are living. That is particular, what makes us make the choices we are making, and what can better secure them. And what you were saying, there have been improvements from 2010 to 2017. Why don't we discuss that? And when we are saying we want to write our own story, what do we mean? What do we see? How many of us follow what is going on beyond the media?
Right.
So it's that risk.
It's the
that's
risk.
striking that balance that I'm
You're worried about. Fred, I mean, especially because I want us to also move the conversation a bit before we move, especially on this issue of earning respect. And it was on this particular conversation or show last night where we actually had one of the panelists saying that as long as we will still have some of us going out of our countries in the name of searching for greener pastures just to sweep streets when we have degrees and still going there to beg for aid, then we will never earn that respect. Do you sense a sense or a feeling of sort of double standards in one way, because we seem to be giving them the leeway to actually treat us the way they do? One, we want to take our children to their schools instead of building our own schools to their standards. Two, whenever we are thinking of aid and stuff like that, we want to go to them. I remember when President Obama, former president of USA, went to Kenya, there are some members of the opposition who went to actually report President Uhuru Kenyatta to him. And what he told them was that you are the same people when I was actually when you were in government during that time, you told us, leave us alone, don't meddle with our business. And now you're here coming to report the current regime to me. Are we the ones to blame because we're giving them this leeway? Is it the case?
I think that we are to blame in only one sense. For me, I really have no problem with young Africans going to study in their universities. I have no problem with us sending our children to their schools. I have no problem with us going to live in their countries or even sweeping streets or even cleaning toilets. That's not the issue as far as I'm concerned. Where we are to blame is in mismanaging our own affairs back home. I mean, I'm very happy for 1 million Africans to go and live in America. But those of us who remain here should try as much as possible to manage our countries better. And I think that Rwanda is a very good example of where efforts have been made over the last 24 years to manage better, to do things differently. And for me, what really aggrieves me is that this is not recognized. Rwanda is discussed as if they are discussing the Central African Republic. They discuss Rwanda as if they are discussing the DRC. Nothing of all the efforts that have been made to put systems in this country that work, to fight corruption, the very things that they despise African governments for, this government has been trying to fight. But they behave as if nothing is happening. There's very little corruption in this country. The police in this country arrest anybody, regardless of how big they are, provided they have committed an offense. If I broke traffic rules and an army general came and did the same, that army general will be arrested in the same way that I'll be arrested. Now, that is an example of a country that
so
is
who's
trying
supposed
to
be telling that story? Who's supposed to be amplifying these
Well,
deeds?
I think that increasingly we Africans are trying to do this, and I have been one of those people who try to do this. And people accuse me, you're always just saying positive things, you don't criticize, and I'm saying, look, there are too many people criticizing. I don't want to join them. I want to say something that other people are not saying. Now, you want criticism? Go and read Western media, read The Guardian, The Times of London, it's all there. A lot of it is rubbish. I don't want to repeat it, because I know that there are things that are happening here that don't happen elsewhere, that don't happen in the country that I was born in. Here, I know that if I'm walking on the street, it's unlikely that a policeman will come and threaten me, or a soldier will come and threaten me. I know that for a fact. It's not allowed. Now, I know that here politicians don't take government resources as if they belong to them. Now, all the things that African governments are despised for, this government has tried not to repeat, not to do. So in that sense, Rwanda is trying to lift the standards of public administration. And therefore, Rwanda deserves some respect from some of these hecklers. But they behave as if nothing is happening. It's true, what Gonzag said, that there is this is the journalistic trade. That you just can't say, things are working well in Rwanda. You must inject in some little thing. The fact of the matter is some of the so-called balance is balanced by lies. Outright lies. I read, what newspaper was it, the Daily Mail or something, one of these Western scandal sheets, saying that, these palm trees that are planted in these traffic islands are sprayed with disinfectant every other day. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever heard of that? Now, this journalist was apparently in Rwanda. Now, this guy is such a liar. But he's writing this for an ignorant audience back in the UK who know nothing about this country, who are going to believe this.
But then,
I've never heard of it. This is an outright lie in the name of creating balance.
Right, and here's my question, and that's why I actually was asking Alice and all of you on writing our own stories, telling our own stories. Why then don't we have, those in charge of that exercise coming out to boldly actually set the record straight.
No, it is done.
In such situations.
I was having this discussion with a Ugandan friend of mine because he asked me, are there any independent opinion polls in Rwanda? And I asked him which planet has he been living on. Andrew Mwenda, the Ugandan journalist, has written about this endlessly. All the polls by Gallup, by Ipsos, by the Legatum Institute, they all show that actually Rwandans feel that they are free. Now, about 85%. Now, The Economist goes and says, you know what, Rwandans think they are free, but they are wrong. So some idiot from London is actually telling Rwandans, grown, if they think they are free, they are wrong. Who is he? How does he make up his mind that he knows what Rwandans feel and what they should feel? So we try as much as possible to respond to this. And of course, bad news sells. And there are people who are so entrenched in their attitude towards Rwanda. Rwanda irritates them. Somebody, I think it's Thierry Gatete, who quoted somebody directly, who told him at some point that he was so tired of all the good news coming out of Rwanda. This was some chap from Belgium. So good news coming from here irritates. Rwanda doesn't fit the stereotype. We Africans are supposed to be helped. We Africans, human rights campaigners are supposed to come from Europe, the United States, or wherever they want to come to come and argue on our behalf. Because what? We are mutes. We can't speak for ourselves. We have no brains. We don't know what human rights is. So for me, as Golovo Fred, I'll sit here in Kigali. If the government violates my human rights, I have to wait for Kenneth Roth to come from New York and speak on my behalf.
And that has seemed as the tendency. And of course, you know, in most cases, it has been seen like the opposition has always been seen as the ones that always say, you know what, we need help. And the help, or the helping hand, has always been, let's go and complain to the US Embassy, for example. Or let's go and complain to human rights institution A and B. And all of these have always been from the Western countries. And this is actually tying in line with the question I asked Fred here. Are we partly to blame, or most of our African leaders, or those who are aspiring to be our leaders, to blame for this?
I mean, you cannot take blame for living your life. I think the most important thing is to live our story, rather than whether others believe it or not. That being said, we shouldn't neglect the fact that there may be areas where we need to improve. We should not just say those people hate us, they write negative things about it, and not re-examine everything they are doing. Earlier we were talking about elections and democracy. Yes, the elections just is a subset of what makes up democracy. And our elections are going like this because of other processes that have gone over a long period of time, consensus politics and so on. Also the fact that many people feel uncomfortable to oppose, challenge government. That's why you see there's the most of the opposition lives out of the country. It's not a coincidence. It's not that it's something that just appears from nowhere. Can we get from those criticisms something that can help us improve? Are we perfect? No, we are not. There are areas where we're doing very well, but is that all? Can't in the future be more open competition, much more open competition? There is, but as I said earlier on this show, there are some gaps, areas need improvement. So we should live the story as we are living it. The examples here, I mean, I saw the latest poll saying that Rwanda is one of the most secure countries in the world. It's a fact. I live here. I walk the whole night, almost every day. I have never faced any problem. And I go out of this country within minutes I'm mugged, and say, oh, you come back and say, it is indeed the fact. It's a safest place. So if people appreciate that and somebody is annoyed, so what? Let them be annoyed. It's us to live our life and our story.
Well, I think the vice, the tricky thing here is that there is a division of labor of actors that give lessons to the pupils. And that's a fundamental problem for these Africans, or these Rwandans for that matter, who would go to see ex-embassy or NGO for salvation. This comes so straight into the narrative of the Westerner who salvage, for which interest? Not only people go to them, but they are also solicited to offer that. And this is a fundamental problem when people think they can get their salvation from other people. First of all, it's a problem because history just gives the contrary of that opinion. We know for a fact how our history has done. And this nourishes so much in that narrative of civilization and missionary, etc., etc. So I have a fundamental problem with that because however we have problems with what we see, we should find solutions in ourselves. We should find ways. The same that found ways to solve their problems.
Right.
We have to clean our mess.
Right.
I want to say this because I visited some years back a country, an African country, where I've been told about a political opponent who was very prominent, very principled, and so on. I so happened to go to a law society event, and that person was part of it. I saw the person speaking to the High Commissioner of United Kingdom. I couldn't believe my eyes. Another thing, I met a person coming and said, "Oh, you know, my day today I've been meeting LGTB people." Mm-hmm. That's a diplomat telling me that. So I listened.
But
and
what is wrong with that?
Yes, nothing is wrong with that. But I say, okay, I was waiting for the story. Mm-hmm. What about that? Mm-hmm. Say, no, you know, I have to do that. So I have to tell people. They say, we came to the conclusions that she has a script, and because the model is like that at home, that's what she has to bring to Rwandans. So the fundamental vice here is that they are lesson givers, and we have to follow that. And they are not they are not there to salvage us. Mm-hmm. We have to get out of our own mess and solve our problems.
My problem is when, because look at this in this sense. We have some of the African countries that have undergone or have been going through political turmoil, for example.
Yes.
People have been dying at the hands of bad leadership. Mm-hmm. For how long then should we sit back and fold our hands and say, we have to come up with our own solution?
No.
We saw in Somalia, for example, they had to fly to US to have a summit on solving the Somalian crisis.
I agree.
Where were we as Africans to hold our own summit, even do it in Somalia itself?
I agree with you, but at the same time, yes. That was my point of focusing too much on what is told to us and not also noting progress. Unfortunately, historical time is not the life of an individual. So it's the different time perspective. And change goes slowly. Somebody at the voting poll was telling me something very interesting for me today, saying that how Goma, by being near Gisenyi, has changed recently. They have created streets, you know, tarmac roads, to the point that in Kinshasa they wonder what is happening to Goma. Where did they get this money? So there's a contagion effect. When other people see that something is happening and it is in the hand, you should pay attention, for example, to those all Africans who have come here to attend to that. You have to ask yourself why. These are agents of change in the making. And changes are happening. But we are overwhelmed by what we're seeing, the business as usual. But changes are open. It's not totally by chance that African leaders have requested President Kagame to do the reform. They know what Kagame is doing, and it can be in contradiction of their own practices. Why all those head of state has requested him precisely to make these reforms? And why is it so that they long for him to be the next sitting president? We have also to ask ourselves to pay attention to those ones. It means that people are perhaps more than ever ready for changes, and change will happen.
Change will happen. Fred.
I would like to go a little bit back to what Gonzaga was saying. And I think that he's right in many respects, that we also need to improve. And again, I'm going to argue that there have been lots of improvement, a lot. When I first arrived in Rwanda in 2000,
Yes.
the media had a very specific relationship with the government. It was very antagonistic. Now, Gonzaga, you're a journalist in this country, and you know that that has changed a lot.
Absolutely.
And it hasn't changed because somebody has been lecturing the government. There have been conversations inside the government about what needs to change as far as media is concerned. They have given media more space. The relationship between opposition or so-called opposition in the government here has evolved a great deal. And Frank Habineza is a good friend of mine. I first met Frank in 2013 when he was in exile. And I've had countless conversations with him, both when he was still in exile and after he returned here. I know that Frank came here and he thought that the best way to force the government to do the thing that he wanted to do was to appeal to external forces, to arm twist the government, to allow his party to register, even maybe without fulfilling all the conditions. Believe you me, Frank discovered that actually that was the wrong way to go about these things. Because eventually, after he stopped getting people to try and arm twist the government, things happened very quickly. The government here is very proud of doing the things that they have thought about, not because somebody is pushing them. There has been change, there has been improvement, and I'm sure there is going to continue to be improvement. Rwanda is not perfect, everybody knows that. There are things here that need to be done differently. And I trust that the government here knows these things. One can catalogue a whole range of things that have changed in the last 17 years I've been here. So the thing is, should government embrace something because some external people are saying you should do it? Personally, I think that actually not. Any government should take the time to think things through. And do only those things that it thinks are necessary.
Right.
Not those things that which it will do somebody, or because it is responding to pressure from somebody.
Right. But
personally, I think,
Fred,
so, yeah.
for far too long, I mean, there's always been this issue of we're a sovereign nation.
Yeah.
Even in countries where you really see that there's need to actually sort things out, even not just from Westerners, but even our own internal organs, like the African Union, for instance. And we hear this. We are a sovereign nation. We can do things the way we want it. Are we being hypocritical here?
No, we are not being hypocritical. Eugene, there are issues within the African continent itself. There are issues with interstate relations. There are issues between West African Francophone countries and Anglophone countries. There are different cultures. We do things differently.
Yes.
And yes, there are issues there to be addressed. But I'm not sure that they are going to be addressed by somebody coming from the United States or somebody coming from Europe. No, they will not. These people have been around for a long time. I have attended a lot of AU meetings. Yes. You enter the room and you wonder, is this an African meeting or is this a European meeting? Because the room is full of these people. Now, if they were the ones who are going to cause fundamental change, why is it that they've been trying it for 50 years since we became independent and it hasn't happened? Is this country what it is because somebody came from the moon or from the US and told the government what to do? Or is this country the way it is because Rwandans, and here I mean RPF and other political actors, sat down and diagnosed what the problem was and said, okay, we are going to try and address it this way. And this is what they have been doing. I keep commenting on politics in Uganda. The opposition and the government in Uganda spend so much of their time fighting each other, beating each other up, insulting each other. This has been going on for so long. The opposition specialize in condemning the government for being corrupt and inefficient and so on and so forth. Just look inside them. Look at how they manage donor funds. Donors give opposition parties a lot of money in Uganda. What do they do with it? They manage it very badly. Do they pay salaries of their staff? Not all of them. So our problems are not going to be solved by fighting. Our problems are not going to be solved by us inviting other people to come and solve them for us. We must face up to these things. And for me, again, I will emphasize, I think that Rwanda is doing something different. In Rwanda, the reason why we don't have adversarial contestation here, and Gonzaga mentioned how opposition groups are living abroad. Some of those opposition groups that are living abroad would have wanted to have a certain mode of politics in this country. Politics that is judged by at least those parties that are inside the country to be dangerous for the country. So for the time being, they are quite happy to have them living outside rather than having them come here and cause destabilization. Now, what Rwanda is doing, God knows. We don't know whether it's going to last. But for me, I am immensely happy to see President Kagame campaigning and to see Dr. Viruta sitting there and to see Ms. Mukabalisa doing the same, and PL supporters are doing the same. This is different. This is Rwandans thinking for themselves. Nobody came from somewhere else to tell them to do it.
Right.
And I think that that stands much higher chances of working and producing positive. Just had a war. The war ended 6 months ago. Can you have multi-party elections? Those things always end up in chaos. Why is South Sudan in chaos? Because somebody tried to tell them how to run their country. Organize elections before you even sort out the important things of how the different political parties relate to each other.
Right. But sadly, someone actually endorsed what they were told to do. And this is actually my issue here, that we still have some of us, and here we are saying we have to stay united, we have to do things differently, we have to have homegrown solutions to our problems. Yet we are not all speaking with one voice on that particular issue.
Yes.
How do we fight this particular war, or how do we deal with this issue? That is actually my major concern. I'm going to come back to you. Let me hear from Gonzaga on this.
I mean, why do you think there is a war? My position has always been we can go on. If we have decided, if we can have a conversation within our country, within the different actors, reform and improve, I don't think we need to fight the war with anybody else outside the country. Of course, they may have an effect. Indeed, if they are allowed to dominate the narrative, yes, they could affect. So there has to be continuous rebuttals and so on. But the most important thing is inside. I disagree with the Dr. Gorowan when I see PSD and the PR campaigning for the RPF. Yes, because for me, I think they abandon the core responsibility of having. Last time we were discussing tax policy here, and we were saying that what happened, what the other candidates were talking about tax policy was not informed by research. I thought more established political parties like PSD, if they to engage the RPF openly, because this is a concern that many people have an issue on, because they have more resources, they have both materially and intellectually, because they've been in government for a long time.
Can't they do that? Can't they do that?
I mean, if us, we don't see it. They say they do it in the political parties forum, but us, they say, if we could sit and we wait much better, and we also be engaged, I think it would be much better than all of them siding with one candidate.
Yeah, but Eugene, I think that one thing that Gonzaga is saying here, which he forgets, is that actually politicians in this country are taxpayers. The pain that we ordinary citizens feel as far as paying tax is concerned is the same pain they feel. So these conversations happen. Now his preference is for an open discussion. Now that's one way of doing it. The choice that has been made in this country, at least for now, is that these discussions will happen, but they'll happen in the right place, in the right forum. Now, why do we pay such high taxes in Rwanda? We pay high taxes because the government here is so determined to win itself off aid. Now, we are not going to achieve that by having an easy ride. We are going to have to pay taxes.
I don't have a problem with
the other thing that you mentioned, I think that chances of problems like those or issues like those being sorted out quickly and in a way that makes organizations are speaking to themselves without necessarily arguing across the barricades. Now, of course, you're right. The Green Party and the independent candidate have been promising such big things. They want to build new cities. They want to build hospitals. At the same time, they want to cut taxes. Now, why are they arguing this? They're not arguing this because somehow there is no open discussion. The sensible thing to do for them would have been to try and find out why are taxes high in Rwanda. If we cut taxes, what does that imply? It's very simple. I was actually quite surprised that they would make promises while promising things that are going to make it's very difficult for them to deliver on those promises.
Right. We will actually have a proper conversation on a proper evaluation of all the conversations that took place during this election. And of course, that will happen during the post-election analysis after the final announcement of the results. But of course, as we close nice and easy, I want to hear from you, Alice. Today, I'm still asked, more than 20 years later, after the good reports that we've seen as far as Rwanda is concerned, I've heard from different people, who keep asking me about, Rwanda being, a country that is a dictatorship. I have people who call me and ask me, if they're international media and they want to hear about the electoral process. For how long are we still going to, see people still say this and again come back and say, but we see, a clean city, we see people who are actually doing... Is there an ulterior motive to just say, we're going to be stubborn and this is the narrative we have about Rwanda and that's how it's going to stay?
Well, narratives live long lives. So this is... and when they are spread as widely as they are spread here, they will still be there to confront. But also those narratives meet the subconscious of certain people. I'm not speaking about Westerners only, I'm speaking about also Africans who have been alienated to those models. We speak from the references we have. Perhaps the difference with those who live here, Rwandans and non-Rwandans, is very much experiencing what is happening. What has happened in Rwanda of the last 2 decades is very much trying to get ourselves from the mess and create the future we believe we deserve. It has taken visionary leadership. It has taken a lot of capacity of organization. Actually, among things that was striking me during the campaigns as well as during the elections today, the names, the first from the last name for a particular room while we were voting were mentioned. So people could come without the identity card. People could, and this has taken a lot of efforts to build, to create a sense. And I was listening carefully to some other medias who would say, with Rwanda we can be confident we'll very soon know about the result of the election. I think these have taken capacity of organization that should be recognized to not only to the government, but before the government to run the Patriotic Front itself. But it takes also the people to the discipline that people accept to have. And I tracked all those days, the fear that's was talking about. So it should be an occasion for us all, Rwandans, non-Rwandans, to learn. What Rwanda is forcing us to is a very difficult exercise of humility and trying to see what is it that we are seeing that is working for Rwandans. It doesn't mean that in Uganda it will work as well, or in Kenya or in DRC and other places.
It has to be what works for you.
But what it takes us, it is very important when a people accept to capture its destiny and build its future.
Good.
So we'll make mistakes, we'll experience trials and errors, but at least when this conviction is coming in, and the most important thing that I'm seeing is that ownership
of the whole process.
Of the whole process. And I think it can happen in any other countries, given accumulation of those ingredients I was saying.
Right.
Visionary leadership is extremely important where systems are still in the making.
Okay.
Capacity of organization is something we have to learn. But how you organize elections in London will not be how you organize elections
in another place.
In another place.
Right. Dr. Fred, as we go, how do we now sustain this? Because this is an environment or a situation that we have other people, apart from those who probably feel that it's not proper, but we have others who, I've seen a viral video going out of a Kenyan woman who's actually saying, you know, we are ready to take President Kagame, give him to us. If you say you don't, we have people who are envious, jealous of Rwanda. And they wish that this environment was what is in their countries. How do we sustain this? How do we keep this momentum going for the next 7, 20, 24 years to come?
I think one of the things is that we who live here, we who want to see this progress even further, is that we should not get carried away by the limited success that has been achieved. Because there is a great deal that remains to be done. This country has recovered from the genocide. Everybody knows that. It has gone a little beyond recovering from the genocide and actually done things that other more sort of better endowed countries have failed to do. Now, we should not get carried away. It is important to keep our feet firmly on the ground and face those challenges that remain. But more importantly, I think that the dialogue that has been happening since the genocide ended among the different political actors, that should be sustained. If that breaks down, this country is going to slide back very quickly. If you allow these political contestations that are just built around people wanting to be presidents, you know, let this one move aside, let me also try it. If you allow that kind of politics to come to Rwanda anytime soon, we are going to have problems in this country. Right. The dialogue that brings together all the political actors, big and small, to discuss things that concern this country, to discuss problems and try to identify problems collectively and identify solutions to those problems collectively. Now, the identified problems, solutions may be the wrong ones. So people should be open-minded. If it's the wrong solution, change it. Try something else. But just to emphasize one small point. I do agree with Gonzaga when he says, look, let's leave our reality. Let's keep focusing on what we are doing. But actually, these poisonous narratives do have an effect. Let me tell you a story which I heard recently, and I heard it from a very good source. There was a report in the Daily Mail in the UK written by some chap called Ian Birrell. This guy hates the RPF and hates President Kagame so pathologically that every time he writes things about Rwanda, some of them are actually fabricated. Now, he wrote about the late Dr. Gasakuri, and that story was amazing in the degree of inaccuracies in it. The claims that are just completely false. Now, what happened is he then spices up his story with saying, look, this is the kind of government that British taxpayers' money is going to. Why are we sending our money to this dictatorship? Do you know what that triggered? It triggered a process because he claimed that Dr. Gasakuri died here because there was a scandal in the Ministry of Health. They destroyed his lifetime's work because he had built a robust health system and they had destroyed it. It's all such rubbish because no such thing happened. But what happened is that it triggered a process in the Global Fund. The representative of the UK government in the Global Fund did ask questions. They held meetings about it. He wanted to know, are these things true? If they are true, why are we giving the government of Rwanda our money? I found it amazing that somehow this report comes out in a British tabloid The report is largely inaccurate. It triggers a process where the British government is now beginning to examine, should we be giving money to the Rwanda government?
Moral of the story here?
Yeah.
Very
the
briefly.
moral of the story is we should not let people like Ian Birrell get away with nonsense.
Okay.
If they write falsehoods, we should respond to them, because his story was built on a falsehood.
All right. Gonza, for you, I mean, how do we sustain this? How do we not get excited and say, you know what, even us, we want to be like another country that has confrontational kind of politics? How do we sustain and maintain this in a very brief
Dr. Grover talked
way?
about the dialogue. I think for me, the dialogue should be expanded. The actors engaged in the dialogue there should be an attempt at least to expand those actors, not only political parties which support the RPF. There are others who may have alternative views, or even among the citizenry, so that I've been saying many times that we need more direct elections at the lower level, so that competition becomes natural. People learn, because it may come in future when we have not prepared for it, and it comes suddenly, and there is chaos. So it's better that a gradual organization, a gradual preparation. I still believe we missed the chance for a good transition now. So there should be an active, open activity towards a transition to another president.
I see the two of them smiling, and I just want them 30 seconds
It's
or less.
the only way to sustain.
Just to rebuttal that. I mean, is it
that
something
should
that you also buy into? Just very briefly, because we also have to go.
You know, my response to Gonzaga would be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. In my own native country, Uganda, we have direct elections, right from parliament through to the village level. Come and see how they are conducted. Come and see what substance is involved in those elections. Come and see the damage these kinds of elections have done to the economy, to the moral fabric of the country. Because elections in Africa are very rarely issue-focused. Elections involve bribery. Elections involve telling lies. Elections involve all kinds of things. So for me, direct elections in Rwanda are the grassroots. You want constituents, MPs, please have a look where they have these things and see what is there, and tell me whether that's what you want to see here.
Right.
We can have a dialogue on it, not just assume that what we have is perfect. We shall never move to another level.
It's not perfect. It is fit for the context. For now. For now, that is
fit for the
Now we're not
for the
remain now.
For a while, and for a while. You know, I'm always amazed to see fellow Africans discussing the of the tribes, the ethnicities, and so on. And I always ask a very stupid question, maybe, but stubbornly, when are you going to become citizen of a country and not
a member of a tribe?
Yes, because we should also learn history, change, transformation takes time. And we need to consolidate our societies. These are societies that have gone through trauma of all kinds. And we have to reconstitute the social and moral fabric before we go into big confrontation. We need to agree on how we want to build our countries. So what are you competing on? Even here in Rwanda, maybe we will have the opportunity to discuss that. I find an act of contempt that certain persons, because they wake up one day and think they can become a president of a country that has so much to do still. And they are praised, idolized, and even taken. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? No, I mean, being a president in Africa is a tough job. It is not given. So, well, I appreciate that citizens can have their dreams, as we all sleep and all have dreams. But when it reaches a point where there's contempt, because nobody want to ask them what they think they would do. And it's okay just to wake up and say, you know, I want to compete for election and I will have 63%, if not 51%, for having done what?
Okay. I sense the anger in your voice. I sense the frustration. We'll have that conversation.
No, I mean, well, I was born in Congo.
Yes.
I know what chaos is. I know what has happened for it. So any other thing is superstructural. We are here. We know our, and that's why I'm saying, even our young generations, we need to understand what has happened to us, what has happened all those years, and what can still happen. So if we don't take stock of what has taken our elders or our contemporaries to enjoy what we are saying, we've missed the point.
We've missed the point. What a perfect way to actually end this conversation right here. Of course, I want to say thank you so much, Asante Sana, for being part of this conversation. It's a conversation that we'll still have again during the post-election analysis when the final result will be already out. Just here to give you analysis on the Rwanda Decides 2017. It's been a conversation that has been also open to the public. And I see Muhizi saying, great talk, great talk, great talk. Thank you so much for that. And of course, Ignatius Mugabo says, Mr. Mutewi is making a lot of sense. Rwanda should lead a fundamental change in Africa. We have another one here from Bertrand Lize. Says, USA, with a population of 326 million, 2 political parties, 2 presidential candidates, and 1 with majority of votes lost. A model of democracy? This is the question that he's actually asking right here. Another one here, very funny in a way. Ignatius is actually saying that Anangwe has a point. We admire, worship, promote their culture. And he actually says, you guys are right now debating in their language. And so we seem to have been arrested in this whole thing. How good?
I think that's a trivial point.
It's a trivial point.
Yeah.
Very trivial, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ignatius, my panel said that's a trivial point. But of course, thank you for that particular point. It's a democratic space for you to actually share your views and tell us what you think about that. We'll see you again next time, same place. Keep it Rwanda Television. We have more analysis coming your way. And of course, special coverage of the exit polls that will be taking place tonight. We have a team of our journalists who are on the ground and of course right here in studio to give you the breakdown of the analysis, and also panelists who will be helping us to make sense of what is happening. My name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.